Conservatives would have liked to be working today to counter the doubling of housing costs this Prime Minister has caused, or the record food price inflation, which has been 36% higher in Canada than in the US. But unfortunately, the Prime Minister has paralyzed Parliament by refusing your ruling directing his government to turn over evidence in the $400 million green slush fund scandal that the Auditor General says involves 186 conflicts of interest, with the chair of the fund found guilty. What has he got to hide?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition is not being truthful with Canadians. It is the RCMP Commissioner himself who said the RCMP's ability to receive and use information obtained through this production order and under the compulsory powers afforded by the Auditor General Act in the course of a criminal investigation could give rise to concerns under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It is therefore highly unlikely that any information obtained by the RCMP under the motion where privacy interests exist could be used to support a criminal prosecution or further a criminal investigation. Mr. Speaker, let's get this.
Yeah, cut her off.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
This is a $400 million scandal involving Liberal appointees giving millions of dollars to their own companies, and the minister's story is now changing. Last week, she claimed that the government had given documents to the RCMP. This week, they claim that if they gave documents to the RCMP, it would cause the Charter of Rights to come crashing down. It sounds like there's a new story every week to justify paralyzing Parliament to cover up the truth. What is in these documents about this $400 million scandal that the Prime Minister is so afraid of?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
This is a typical witch hunt from the Leader of the Opposition to go after people who have nothing to do with this. These are files such as personnel files that contain private information of individuals who have nothing to do with what is going on. Mr. Speaker, it is the RCMP and the Auditor General themselves who raised concerns with this motion, and it is the government's view that we should send this to committee so that we can get on with the important work of this House and protect the rights of Canadians.
Okay.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
A witch hunt? The Ethics Commissioner appointed by this government has found the chair of the fund in violation of the law. The Auditor General, also appointed by this government, says there were 186 conflicts of interest involving Liberal appointees giving millions of dollars to their own companies. $400 million. Potential criminality, according to the main whistleblower in the scandal. Any other employer would voluntarily turn over all the evidence to the police if it had been ripped off by its own staff. What is the Prime Minister hiding?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, if and when the police request that information, it will obviously be handed over because that is proper judicial process. But when it is Parliament that is doing it, this is where Canadians should be concerned, Mr. Speaker, because when he is going after the rights of other Canadians, it's only a matter of time before his political vendettas come after the rights of all Canadians. Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, just to be clear here, the Bloc Québécois tabled Bill C-282 to exempt supply management from any future trade negotiations. All parties in this House have at different times supported that bill, which is now in the Senate. Now, I'd like to be very clear. The government has executive power based on its democratic election. Does this government still agree that supply management should be exempted from all further trade negotiations in future? The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food.
Mr. Speaker, and being a dairy farmer for a large portion of my life, I fully understand and appreciate the value of the supply management programme, Mr. Speaker. Our government fully supports Bill C-282 and urges the other place to move on this legislation as quickly as possible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I should retire and go to the Senate.
The honourable member. Let me further clarify, Mr. Speaker. There are 2 senators, neither of them elected. They're not saying that they're not sure. They're saying very clearly that supply management should be up for grabs in future trade negotiations. It should not be excluded from them. They are saying the opposite of what the government is saying. By not imposing its will on 2 non-elected senators, is this government turning its backs on agricultural producers in Quebec and Canada? The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, my colleagues should not come to me to say that our government is turning its backs on dairy producers. We have always been there for dairy producers from the very beginning, and we will continue to stand up for them. Mr. Speaker, we decided to appoint independent senators. And once again, I think the Bloc Québécois should be able to understand this concept.
The honourable member from Burnaby South.
You won't believe this.
Here we go.
Corporate landlords are using AI technology to rip off renters. They're jacking up rent. Now, the United States is taking legal action against this, but the Liberals are letting it happen here in Canada. Now, I know the Conservatives don't care because their chief advisor is also a chief lobbyist for corporate landlords. But what's the Liberals' excuse?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable colleague for his question and his concern for the rising cost of rent, which I completely agree is a very serious issue. Where we differ is we're not satisfied with just launching complaints on the floor of the House of Commons. We want to advance policies that actually put solutions on the table that make a meaningful difference for families. That's why we're putting measures in place to help build more homes, like cutting taxes on apartment construction. It's why we're increasing investments to build more affordable housing, and it's why we put a Renters' Bill of Rights on the table to help protect renters in precarious situations. I only wish the NDP would care enough to join us in trying to do something about the problem.
The Honourable Member of Burnaby South.
Excuses are way cheaper than rent. Shamattawa First Nation has had undrinkable water since 2018. And this Liberal government is fighting them in court, arguing that they do not have a legal responsibility to clean the water. They're also arguing that when a minister says something, that's just politics. That's not something you have to believe that they're actually going to do. Will the Liberals call off the lawyers and clean up the water?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's exactly what we've been doing over the last 9 years, cleaning up the mess that the Conservatives left behind with over $8 billion in investments in clean water operation plants across the country, Mr. Speaker. And we have legislation, incidentally, tied up in committee. Hopefully it will get to this House shortly. I will be testifying tomorrow about the legislation. There are hundreds of chiefs that have called on the NDP and the Conservatives to get this legislation moving through the House, so we never go back to that time again.
The honourable member from New Westminster Burnaby knows what I'm about to say, so I'm going to ask him to please not take the mic unless recognised. The honourable member from Haldimand, Norfolk.
After 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and now time is up. Mr. Speaker, you ruled that the government has violated the House order to turn over evidence to the RCMP related to the $400 million Green Slush Fund scandal. Yet, the Liberal government continues to obstruct justice by refusing to turn over these documents. When will they end this cover-up and let the House focus on solving the housing, food, and inflation crisis that they created?